Today's presentation is from Dr. AJ Shah and Dr. Sambal Manikam. Dr. AJ Shah is a highly experienced food scientist and technologist. He is an accredited food safety auditor to a number of certification bodies. Dr. Shah has been operating in food technical consultancy business for 19 years, providing scientific and technical food solutions to the food industry. Dr. Vasambal Manikam has a PhD in the field of food science and nutrition. Her passion is to break down the complex science behind food and health into layman terms. Currently, Dr. Manikam is working closely as project consultant and author with Pre-Scouter Incorporated. Take it away, Dr. Shah and Dr. Manikam.
No food company is immune to encountering a food recall. We've all seen that. Usually we get about 1 or 2 recalls per week. I just noticed today that there was another recall with kombucha tea, where the problem was, like a lot of gas within the bottle, and the bottle tops pop up. So as you can see, that there's always lots of recalls around. It's not just in Australia, but throughout the world. So recalls are a norm these days. We've all seen food recalls occurring regularly, and claims for these recalls can be very complex and also very expensive. So in this presentation, both Vasambal and myself will be defining what a food recall is. We will then be focusing on causes of food recalls worldwide with some examples. The main focus will be to look at the preventative measures to avoid and manage the increasing trend of food recalls. I'm just going to take you to the next slide. So this shows you the table of contents. We'll be looking at the headings in bold. What is a food recall? Causes of food recalls worldwide, preventative and management measures. Within that, it's actually broken down into 3 sections: traditional measures, innovative systems, and other technologies. And finally, to finish off, we will look at insurance policies related to recalls. I'm going to now pass you over to Vasambal to sort of talk about what a food recall is, and she can then lead on. Vasambal, take over, please.
Thank you, Ajay. As we could all observe, at least every month there is a recall announced. It is quite alarming, not only because it could cause financial loss to the company, but more importantly, food waste, as well as endangering the lives of consumers. A food recall is therefore a request or an action to remove or return a food product after a safety issue or defect has been discovered, so as no harm could be caused to the public. In that case, all food businesses, whether it's a startup, a small or medium enterprise, they all must have procedures in place to be able to quickly remove any unsafe food from the marketplace to protect public health and safety. Hence, a food recall may be initiated as a result of a report or complaints from a variety of sources. In a first instance, a food recall may be initiated as a result of a report from a food manufacturer. If we look at a recent example, was the removal of an alcoholic beverage from most of the states in Australia, and that happened early January 2019, where the product, the son of a plum, peach, and plum sour ale 330 ml bottle was removed from the market due to a packaging fault, and that was the result. That could result in the potential for the top to pop open. This is a hazard because if the top pops open, consumers could be injured. Let's look at another example of where or how a product recall could happen. A typical example is a government agency could also proceed with a product recall, as could be seen in the case where a single batch of Mungali Creek fermented probiotic drink was recalled in Queensland again earlier this year. So in the month of January, we've already had 2 recalls so far due to the testing showing presence of E. coli. And so these are critical to the public health. A food recall may also be occurring as a result of a food business internal auditing. So if any defects or safety issue has been identified during an internal auditing, that could result as a food recall as well. So in a sense, if that happened, it is a little bit better because the food hasn't gone out of the food industry yet, and there will be less cost involved if in any case, so they can stop food production at that particular instance. Now, it is also worthwhile noting that there is a significant difference between a food withdrawal and a food recall. A food withdrawal involves removing food from the supply chain where there is no health or safety issue. So the difference here is a food recall, there is actually a health and safety issue, but a food withdrawal could happen if the product is underweight or has a quality defect. Sometimes there is a confusion between conducting a mock withdrawal or a mock recall. It is actually a useful exercise to check for identification and traceability. And it is very important to consider these differences before going ahead and consider a food recall or food withdrawal. I will now pass on to Ajay, who will elaborate more on food recalls and the major causes globally. Ajay, would you like to take over?
Thank you, Sambal. I'll sort of take over from here. Causes of food recalls worldwide. Firstly, you got microbial contamination with pathogenic microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, or even parasites. I mean, with bacteria, everybody's heard of Listeria mono type contaminations in dairy products, as well as E. coli with dairy products. And sometimes you can get sort of viruses like norovirus in sort of leafy vegetables. And parasites could be things like cryptosporidium, in water. The second point is labeling. Non-compliant labeling can lead to recalls. Incorrect food ingredients on the ingredient list can also lead to labels. Incorrect date markings or other food labeling errors can also lead to labeling. Now, just on that front, especially with labeling, it's very, very important that the label is correct, because if there is any allergens within the product and that's not actually declared on the label, then that would potentially be a recall incident. In terms of foreign matter, I think Sambal mentioned a couple. Things like contamination with materials such as glass, metal, or plastic objects. All these can happen in the food industry, especially when the machines are not serviced properly. You can get metal fragments and shavings from metals rubbing. So it's very critical that machines and things are maintained on a regular basis. And again, to have sort of metal detection or X-ray machines which are operating at their max, with high sensitivity. Again, that also depends on how much has been invested on the machine. So the higher the sensitivity of the machine, the higher the cost. Chemical and other contaminants could be things from cleaning products. We've also heard of cases where cleaning products have been left behind within the pipework of the dairies. So that's why it's important that when you're actually checking for any residual water, it's important to check that there is no you basically do a pH check just to make sure that there is no acids or anything left within the pipes as residual chemicals which would otherwise contaminate products such as milk. The other products could be pesticides. If the levels of pesticides are high in vegetables, again, it's very important that pesticides are within the maximum residual limits, and also food lubes like machine oils, etc. So it's important that the right quantities are there. It's not sort of flooded with oil, because that also will lead to contamination with chemicals, with oils into the food, which will be classified as chemical contamination. As I mentioned earlier on, undeclared allergens due to incorrect labeling, incorrect packaging, or contamination of the product by an allergen. And there have been many cases where there are products which are undeclared in terms of allergens, and then potentially when people government authorities do test the products, they find allergens, and then that actually leads to big recalls of the products. The other one is packaging faults, where a fault in when there is a fault in the food packaging results in contamination, presence of glass or metal, etc. Of the food, or a potential choking hazard. And as Vasamble mentioned, that in the case of the bottles of the ale that she mentioned, that again, there's a lot of pressure in that to cause a packaging fault. The explosion of the material through high pressure. The next is biotoxin contamination with biological toxins such as histamine in fish and paralytic shellfish toxins in oysters, as well as hydrocyanogenic acids as well in raw kernels, apricot kernels. There was a recent case, I think last month, here in Australia, where they found that particular biotoxin. So that's a prime example. Others could be unsafe levels of additives or presence of therapeutic drugs. I'll now pass you over to Vasamble to talk to you about food recalls statistics coordinated by FISANZ.
Thank you, Ajay. As we could see, the food recall statistics was published by FISANZ in March last year. And as we see from the table, from the 1st Jan 2008 to 31st December 2017, there were 626 food recalls identified. It is quite alarming to indicate that for the last 10 years, the average number of recalls per annum is estimated to be about 63. That's equivalent to about 5 recalls per month. But what's astonishing from the data is that 230 recalls are solely related to undeclared allergens. 174 are related to microbial contamination, which is mainly due to Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli, and 40 due to biotoxin, such as shellfish toxins and hydrocyanic acid, as mentioned by Ajay earlier. And these are some of the biotoxins that are naturally present in tapioca chips. So the hydrocyanic acid is naturally present, which is a naturally occurring cyanide present in tapioca. And these, if those are not mentioned on the labeling or the ingredient list, these could be potentially dangerous to consumers. And as we move through the table, we could see 108 recalls from fluorine matter, 15 due to labeling inadequacies. And these are very, very serious data that needs to be considered and discussed and see how and what can be done in order to reduce those incidences, especially in cases of undeclared allergens, because these could be serious. This could cause serious health consequences to consumers, if not lethal. I'd like now to talk a little bit about food recall statistics in the USA. It's not too dramatic. It's more or less similar to the data I just presented in Australia. As we know, the number and magnitude of recalls are constantly increasing in a significant way all around the globe. Here in the US, the average number of recalls declared from the year 2004 to 2008 was about 304 annually. And that has more than doubled between the year 2009 and 2018. So there has been a significant increase within the next 10 years. And see, again, we gotta really be thinking what are we doing, what are the industry doing to really reduce those food recall incidences to protect consumers, as well as reducing food waste, because when these food are being recalled, they are not being used, and so this is one of the causes of food waste as well. And so we're gonna really be asking the big question: why there are so many food recalls, such as undeclared allergens, and what are being done? What could be done to avoid those incidences? On that note, Ajay would be elaborating a little bit further on why and how globalized food supply chain is related to an increasing trend of food recalls.
Thank you, Vasambal. Okay. Causes of food recalls worldwide. Firstly, increase in food recalls can be attributed to the following. An increasingly complex food supply chain system now exists globally. Our food, it's not like in the old days, the food was just sort of moving around within the country. Now we are actually getting a lot of food moving around through the globe. A lot of food coming from different destinations like USA. From Australia, it's going to other parts of the world like China, United Kingdom, Europe, back to US, etc. So because of that, if some countries are not sort of following global food safety initiative standards, then we have a little bit of an issue if we are actually importing products in this country or to other countries for that matter. With the GFSI standards, it's pretty much on the ball that the standard is robust, and if people are sort of importing foods on a lower standards, then the risk is higher in terms of recalls. So dramatic increase in undeclared allergen recalls, largely due to that factor as well. Globalized food supply chain can result in the following, like food terrorism or threat, fraud and adulteration. I just wanted to touch base on food defense and food fraud. Please note that food defense and food fraud are not the same thing. Food defense actually relates to the effort to protect food from acts of intentional adulteration with the intent to cause harm. For example, recently in September 2018, we all know the episode of needles in strawberries, where 7 brands of strawberries were affected within this country. But not only that, some of these products were also exported to New Zealand, and people there also found needles within the strawberries. So you can imagine it can quickly decimate the industry, just incidents like this. So from just food terrorism. Food fraud. This relates to the effort to protect food from intentional adulteration with the intent of financial gain. This may or may not cause harm. For example, we all remember the case of melamine in baby formula in September 2008, which sickened 54,000 babies and killed 4. The Chinese food companies used the nitrogen-based compound in the formula and other products to make these products appear to have more protein in them. And the devastating effect was it harmed the kidneys of babies, etc. And the same thing would happen with pet foods as well. Now, internal auditing, if that is not conducted adequately, can also lead to a recall, because internal audit really is the true verification of the system working within the organization. Now, if that is not taken seriously, then the company leaves itself wide open. So it's really important that internal auditing is conducted adequately. Non-compliance to food standards can be another one. If you do not follow the right sort of standards, then that can also lead to incidents of food recall. Again, lack of clearly defined HACCP plans and verifications. If the HACCP plans are not reviewed, with changes that may happen from change of formulations or change of processing conditions, or sort of if new machinery has been brought in and hasn't been sort of risks assessed, then obviously you leave yourself wide open with a possibility of a recall. Another one is ineffective good manufacturing practices. This could be sort of due to clean down is not appropriate, and particularly if allergen hang points are not cleaned and sanitary, this could lead to cross-contamination as well. I think that's about all on that one. We will now look at preventative measures to avoid and manage the increasing trend of food recalls. Now, with this particular section of the presentation, it's actually divided into 3 parts, as I indicated on the contents page. We'll look at the traditional, the innovative, and other influential methods to prevent the onset of food recalls. I'm now going to pass you over to Vasambo to talk to you a little bit about establishing food safety plan using a HACCP approach.
Thank you, Ajay. First off, I'd like to mention that whether it's a startup, a medium enterprise, a large business, or a small enterprise, whatever category of food business it is very crucial to have a very well-established food safety plan using the HACCP approach, where CCPs, which stands for critical control points, are strictly identified and monitored. It is also important to always make sure that the plan is kept up to date and current with the, for instance, if there is facility production or product formulation changes, it is always worthwhile to go back to all the documents and make any changes required to ensure that all potential risks are fully covered. And that will save the organization a lot of time, money, and save brand reputation as well. So having a well-equipped team on board to work on the HACCP plan and identify any risks is very, very important. The next traditional methods that I'd like to talk about is having a mock food recall setup. So the mock food recall is a well-known preventive measure, but it is not often being considered. Essentially, it is a verification procedure that will help business plan ahead and actually save time and cost when a food recall occurs. I'd like to say that spending some quality time on setting up and organizing regular mock food recall within the food supply chain could be a first preventive measure, because it does help to assess whether the recall procedures that are already in place are effective enough to respond to an actual recall. So it is best to have a mock food recall throughout the food supply chain, from the farmers up to the distributor point. The MFRs, which stands for mock food recall, consist of having a good recall plan to help manufacturers and food businesses prepare to deal with an emergency event as well, which is also known as a crisis management plan. For instance, in the case of a power cut or refrigeration failure, the company is prepared to, because they already have this crisis management plan, and to know how to handle the situation in that particular incident. It is also worthwhile noting that these plans should be reviewed, tested, and updated at least once per year. And all changes and lessons learned from all the mock recalls conducted within the food company are recorded and analyzed, and that will help. The reason why it is important to record all data obtained from one particular mock recall is to enhance or make future improvements. Well, if a company is not or are not better prepared, then this would certainly cost them a lot more if they actually encounter a recall. So there is basically 8 steps that are involved in conducting a mock food recall successfully. I'll not go deeply into the 8 steps, but what I would say is it is very important to have the system implemented and have a experienced recall team to actually conduct a mock recall on a random day, and select a random product to be analyzed during that recall. And it is also, it could also help to track product during processing stages to see if there are any pathogens or any foreign matter within that particular product before it continues within the production chain. So if at one particular point a foreign matter, for example, has been identified, then production could be stopped right then and there, and that will save a lot of time, cost, and could save a whole lot of food waste as well before the product goes out. And so that's basically about mock food recall. As we mentioned earlier, it is very important to conduct food safety auditing, internal food safety auditing. And I'd like to invite Ajay to elaborate on the importance of having a robust internal auditing system.
Okay, thank you, Visambal. An internal audit is a part of an organization's verification procedures. That is, a team member within the food business itself will be the internal auditor. It is basically a system in place to ensure any food business's quality and food safety program is compliant to the food safety management systems such as GFS-IPAT programs. And if you do not have a proper, if you do not conduct internal audits properly, then obviously the whole system actually will collapse and fall down. So internal audit actually is very important in determining the effectiveness of compliance to the food safety and quality management system. It must be performed by competent, skilled, and experienced auditors. So it's very important that the auditors have had some exposure and experience by having worked with a team of auditors, so that they can actually share knowledge from each other, etc. They must be conducted as part of a managed internal audit program. Again, it must be prioritized on the basis of risk as well. I'll just move to the next slide. I just wanted to give you some sort of qualities of a trained auditor. I'm referring to an internal trained auditor. Now, the first thing they need to look at is integrity. This is the foundation of professionalism, where the work is conducted with honesty, diligence, and with a sense of responsibility. Fair representation. The auditor is in obligation to report any findings accurately and truthfully in a timely and clear manner. The third point is due diligence. Having the ability to make reasoned judgments in any audit situations. Fourth point, confidentiality. This is very important, both whether you're conducting internal audits or external. Again, proper handling of sensitive or confidential information. Fifth point, independence. Be unbiased and maintain objectivity to ensure that the audit findings and conclusions are based only on the audit evidence. The final one is the evidence-based approach. The audit evidence should be able to be verified. This is very important, that when you're actually conducting any audits, you have to have, clear sort of evidence that you can gather from the audits. I would like to now move to the Deming cycle. This is basically also known as a PDCA cycle in the recent terminology, but in the old days it was known as the Deming cycle, where it's basically known as a PDCA cycle. So first thing you do with any audit is you have to plan your audit. You then plan it using a proper checklist. You then conduct the audit that's doing the audit. Once the audit has been done, you then check the audit to find out any findings that you've gathered from your evidence, say whether it's critical, major, or minor findings, or any sort of opportunities for further improvement and any recommendations, which you then sort of pass to the team. They can then go back and act on those findings and observations. So this is kind of known as the PDA cycle. So that concept, which is actually from the ISO standards, it's a very good concept, even applies to this particular model. Now, the most important thing is the audit checklist. The auditor must prepare in advance a work document known as a checklist for reference and to record all audit evidences gathered using a very comprehensive checklist. This is really an important tool. It keeps the scope of the audit focused, ensures all areas are covered, provides evidence of audit and findings. Now, an organization can use applications such as iAuditor, which is freely available if you've got an iPad, on the Apple iPad, to help them create their own checklist, or alternatively, they can actually get a software platform at a fee for service, on the license, on a monthly basis or annual basis, which are compatible for both Apple and Android devices. And again, you can actually conduct audits using these platforms and compile an immediate report. And also, you can incorporate photographs from your cameras from either iPads or mobile phones and incorporate straight into the report. Now, what I wanted to move on to now is some of the questions that are asked before conducting an internal audit. Is things like, I won't be going through every single question, but I'll just highlight the key ones, like what is the function and scope of the internal audit? Who is the person conducting the internal audit? Now that is very important, you know, it has to be a trained, experienced auditor. What level of training will be provided prior to auditing? So, you know, you can't just put anybody to conduct audits. They have to be trained. The training involves, you know, the right questions to ask in order to gather the right information, etc. The other question is, does the manufacturing site's food safety management system conform to specified requirements? Are the concepts of risk included into the internal audits? How are non-conformities addressed? How often is an internal audit scheduled for? So these are some of the questions that needs to be asked before conducting an internal audit. I will just now talk a little bit about food safety internal audit schedule. Now this actually is a document that clearly states what type of audit will be conducted, when it will be carried out, who is going to be responsible for the audit, and also perhaps the time of production must be considered when conducting the audit, so that the auditor can see the process whilst the audit is being conducted. So they can actually pick up any non-conformities which may exist. So this is a model of food safety internal audit schedule. You know, if you look at the diagram, what means what areas you're going to be looking at, or what exactly you'll be sort of looking at in the audit, and where means which section you're going to, you know, it's better to audit not your particular section, but a section which does not basically you don't have any responsibility to that section. So then if you do audit your own things, there's a lot of biasness. This way there is no biasness. So another person from another section can audit your area, and that way you get a very good picture of how you're tracking, who is going to be doing the audit, when is the audit going to take place. You know, you just have to plan this, how the audit is going to be addressed, and how many people are in the team. So this is just a basic food safety internal audit schedule structure. I'm now going to pass you over to Sambal to talk to you about innovative technologies.
Thank you, Ajay. So for the next few minutes, we will discuss a little bit about innovative technologies that are sounding promising to improve food safety, again, on a global level. First off, I'd like to talk a little bit about blockchain, which was developed in 2009 to support cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but has made its way quickly into the food industries, into the food and beverage industry since 2015. Indeed, several applications of blockchain are constantly showing that this novel technology has the potential to maintain efficiency and enhance security within, or safety within, the supply chain. As we know, Walmart, Unilever, or Nestle are few examples of food companies that are collaborating with various type of IT organizations to help develop sustainable solutions to prevent the occurrence of food recalls. I'd like to point out that one major reason of the increasing popularity of blockchain is its ability to eliminate fraudulent data. That means that if the data is entered and stored, it cannot be modified. And so that is helping to reduce the any misleading type of data or fraudulent information, for instance, in the case of food labeling. However, blockchain is not feasible for all type of food items, for example, loose vegetables. But if they are pre-packed, then in that case, the QR code could be included onto the packaging material. And that will help tracking information on the production of vegetables, for example, lettuce or berries, for instance. So in that case, all the information from farm to the end product can be traced back when the QR code is scanned. Now, I'd like to touch on one major application, which was a breakthrough in Canada, where 4 Canadian companies have collaborated with T-Food to implement blockchain technology. Actually, through this development, a new beer was developed, and interestingly, it was named as blockchain, which was officially launched earlier this month. And so the company used blockchain to trace beer grain ingredients from farm to can, as well as what the grain was in contact with. So in that case, they had all the information about the cultivation of the grain throughout and all the steps throughout the production chain. The blockchain beverage, the can feature a QR code on the new label, which consumers can actually scan on their mobile phone to view details of the product and have access to documented data on the origins as well. Now, with this cutting-edge solution, the QR code also unlocks a microsite that contains videos, photos, maps, and other items to capture the journey throughout the whole production of the new beer. This is an important aspect of food traceability, which is a solution in itself to maintain food safety throughout production. I'd like to finish off on the blockchain beer by saying that even though blockchain seems to be a promising technology to solve the problem of food safety and eliminate food recalls, it is an important step forward, but it does not actually solve all of the problems on its own. Before I end up on blockchain, a couple more examples of applications, blockchain applications include E. coli food safety. There was an incident of E. coli food safety around lettuce in September 2018, where Walmart in the US was actually praising the benefits of tracking lettuce and spinach throughout the supply chain via blockchain. And the next example is the French retail giant Auchan, which has implemented again the T-Foods blockchain technology that again helped trace the food sources, with further rollouts expected to follow in Italy, Spain, Portugal, as well as a part in Africa. Now, it is interesting to know that before this system was launched, Vietnam was used as a prototype. So let's see in the next 5 years what more breakthroughs or blockchain can bring about. So the next innovative technology that we would like to discuss is artificial intelligence, and I'll pass on to Ajay to explain further about that.
Okay, artificial intelligence, it's been known since 1956. In short, it's known as AI. It's an umbrella term for three distinctive capabilities, including machine learning, natural processing, and optimization. Now, automation and implementation of robotics are typical examples of artificial intelligence. I mean, if you look at the food industry, the modern food industry now, they tend to bring robots for virtually trying to, you know, basically run the sort of production line. Firstly, you know, they don't have to worry about large issues with cross-contamination and people sort of coughing and spluttering over food, etc., which can lead to sort of contamination issues, leading to possible recalls. With the robots, at least as long as you keep them clean and sanitary, and they can work however you plan them to work. I'll give you an example of vending machines and Internet of Things introduced in Japan. Now, some of these vending machines in Japan, you know, the technology is very advanced in the sense that all vending machines are programmed so that they communicate with a central center, like whichever vending machines have dispensed drinks, they know exactly which vending machine, how many drinks are there, and what the temperature of the vending machine is, etc. So everything is relayed back to the center. They can also detect whether that vending machine requires any maintenance, depending on, you know, like how many times it's dispensed. So they send a team out to actually maintain it. So from that perspective, you know, AI is the way to go. And these days, I think the next wave will be sort of the drones bringing food to people. That's the next phase. Applications of AI. Well, AI entails sterile properties and could be a factor to ensure food safety within the food and beverage industry, in turn to prevent cross-contamination during production, handling, and packaging by workers, as I mentioned earlier. This is why they're bringing robots both in the food and the pharmaceutical industries in a big way. The other use of AI is electronic nose or tongues. You know, are already on the market to be used in order to mimic the human sense and senses, so that they would be basically doing the sensory evaluation and organoleptic type testing. So, you know, because they are able to recognize odors in raw materials, for example. So this technology is moving very fast, and I think it'll be not long before you'll see electronic noses and tongues utilized on, you know, in laboratories. So I'll just finish on applications of AI. I will now pass you over to Samble to talk to you about radio frequency identification technology.
Thank you again, Ajay. Briefly, the RFID is an important technology to identify the presence of an object from a distance, basically without a line of sight. So what it is that it helps track products in real time within the food chain, from the manufacturing floor through to distribution and the retail store. I'd like to now elaborate a little bit on the applications of RFID. One of its main purposes is that it can be incorporated into smart packaging, which transmits radio frequency waves wirelessly using tags and readers to track products for identification and traceability. Another useful application of the RFID is that it could be implemented into the meat industry. For example, the RFID tags can actually be attached with temperature sensors to different crates of meat. And therefore, as the meat is being moved from one point to the other, so for example, if it's being moved from the processing plant to the store's distribution center or the supermarket, these tags are actually read at key transfer points and record any temperature changes. Interestingly, these data are being transmitted to the computer system when a unique identification number on the tags are being read. And therefore, this can help improve food safety because temperature are being recorded and any changes identified can easily be traced back. Furthermore, if we look at the livestock industry, the RFID technology could be useful as well, because it can assist in tracking livestock for public health and improve food safety and quality. An example is, as we know, ear tags are usually attached to cattle to track back their movement, their health, and the one main advantage of RFID is that the reader and the tag are not damaged, even though they are in contact with dirt or mud. And as I mentioned before, it reads and collects unique information from the identification number. So when a cattle is moved from the stall to the processing plant, all these information are being recorded. And from a food safety point, it can also identify when a cattle is sick and hence allow the removal of the animal from the herd. To finish off on RFID, another application, potential application of this new technology is that it can be implemented in the beverage industry as well, where it can be used to identify and quantify flavoring agents that are actually added to soft drinks during production. Just briefly on one of the benefits of RFID is that it is actually as small as a grain of black pepper, and it can be embedded right into a product packaging or product itself. So therefore, it is still readable. It acts just like a microchip. And so it can be read from a distance. Unlike a barcode, the device does not need to be positioned in front of the scanner. So all data can be read from a distance. So these are some of the benefits and applications of RFID that could be beneficial to the food and beverage industry in order to reduce the onset of food recalls and improve food safety. And so to end up on preventive measures, we will now touch on to genome sequencing and food safety program. Before I pass on to Ajay to elaborate more on food safety software, I'd like to touch on genome sequencing. As we are all aware, our food systems and products are rapidly evolving, and so are the associated safety challenges as well. For instance, bacterial contamination. And this happens if enough precautionary measures are not adequately considered. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, a few of the major bacterial contamination concerns include the propagation of E. coli or Salmonella, even Listeria, and these could be detrimental as well. Now, if we go back a little bit earlier in the days, like in the years 1980s, we had first field gel electrophoresis that was used to identify and detect foodborne disease outbreaks and contamination events such as listeria outbreaks. However, this technique was not able to detect any DNA sequences in order to help eliminate those bacteria entrance into the food chain. Interestingly, in this new era, we have a new technology known as the Genome Tracker Network, which has been developed by the US FDA, the Food Drug Administration, and it is considered as one of the first network of laboratories to utilize whole genome sequence to actually identify pathogens. These laboratories are also located in Australia as well as in Europe, and they help to collect any genomic and geographic data from foodborne pathogens. And these data are actually stored on public database. And so all these informations are actually publicly available that help to understand all these bacteria and the DNA sequences of these bacteria that can help improve food safety in the future and prevent the onset of related foodborne illnesses. And so we look forward to see the growth of genome sequencing in the fight and to improve food safety and reduce the number of recalls in the next few years. Now, I'd like to pass on to Ajay to talk a little bit about food safety software and its role in eliminating or managing food recalls.
Thank you, Vasanthal. I just wanted to touch on food safety software. There are a number of softwares out there, but the one that really crops to my mind is Safe Food 360. It's making headways in Europe and also United States and Canada. Unfortunately, it hasn't made as much headway down under. This has the advantage of real-time data on cloud platform, which is accessible anywhere at any time. So basically, you can actually sort of collect all the data and input all the data onto this particular platform. Basically, you can, in order to commence, you can fill all the information on Excel spreadsheets and then populate all that information onto the software platform. It's a very powerful platform, so it triggers reminders of when your micro test is supposed to be done by sending you an email, as well as calibrations. So it's a very powerful tool. You can also it can also communicate with interfaces online with some of the machinery, like say if you got robots in place and if they're taking readings in line, you can transfer that data onto the software and it automatically reads all those critical control points, as well as the critical quality points. Safe Food 360 can cater for all food safety management systems, such as GFSI programs, SQF, FSCC 22000, and also the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is in the US. So they've actually amended everything on their platform to accommodate all these new standards, and they're constantly updating it. So it's great to be able to utilize this powerful tool, and it's encrypted, so it's all fully protected, password protected. So yep, it's a brilliant tool. All online readings, all documented and scanned for the web. All info is readily available. So I just wanted to leave you with the thoughts of food safety software. Now, to finish off, I am going to be talking about insurance policies because they are very critical when you talk about recall. A lot of organizations suffer from recall. Some of them don't have recall policies, and that's where they strike big problems. Now, the most important thing is, are the businesses covered? If you're dealing with food, it's important that your business is fully covered. And in order to have it covered these days, the insurance companies also want to make sure that they are protecting themselves by taking a risk such as yours. So they make sure that you have taken all the precautions in minimizing the risk by having food safety management systems. These days, they ask for things like not just the food safety management systems, but also things like vulnerability assessments, as well as threat assessments, TACCP and BACCP. So a report published by Castrol Management in America mentioned that business owners' insurance policy provides most enterprises with two major forms of coverage: commercial general liability, known as CGL, or business property. Now, the CGL policy contains an exclusion for recall of products that precludes coverage for any claims associated with a product recall or withdrawal. In that case, companies could consider purchasing either first-party or third-party product recall policies, or both. Now, the first-party policies covers coverage for the company's own economic loss incurred due to a recall. These losses could include things like business interruption, lost profits, recall expenses, expenses to respond to adverse publicity, that's like advertising in media, etc. Expenses to rebuild the brand's image, because once you've had a recall, it's very hard to get the confidence back from consumers, etc. You also have consultants costs to deal with. With the third-party policies, you suffer economic loss incurred by third parties such as, the wholesalers, distributors, and customers. If there is anybody injured in any way or harmed in any way, then obviously, there'll be additional costs. So losses include removal of recalled products from stores and distribution centers, transportation and disposal costs of products, additional personnel, overtime, cleaning equipment, and laboratory analysis. Now, the most important thing now I'm going to talk about is what to look for in a recall policy. So it's essential that these are the 5 points that one needs to look at. Does the policy cover loss, profits, and revenue? What about logistics and repair costs? How is loss calculated? Does the policy provide coverage for claims by third parties? That means third parties are people like customers or consumers. Will the policy cover the loss from an FDA administrative detention? That in particular applies to USA. I would like to just say thank you very much to everybody for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, AJ and Vasambal. That concludes today's presentation.